Hi everyone, I'm Samuel Reed. I'm 67 years old and I've lived in this city most of my life. My days were quiet, tending to my small garden on the balcony, reading the newspaper with my morning coffee, and keeping in touch with my daughter, Lydia, who has always been thoughtful and considerate. I never imagined that the calm life I'd built for myself could be shattered by the people I once trusted the most. It all started one morning when I received a call from my son, Darren. His voice was sharp, almost accusatory. "Dad, the kids have appointments. What about the medical plan? You were supposed to handle it." I could hear the tension in his tone. "Darren," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we depended on that plan. You don't even know who provided it. You just assumed it would be there and now you're angry." His voice rose. "You're supposed to help your grandkids. Isn't that your obligation?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. Obligated to nothing. I chose to help because I wanted to, and I choose to stop now. That's it. Simple as that. There was a pause, and then he barked, "You're selfish." A bitter old man throwing a tantrum because your son is living his life. It hurt, deeper than I expected. But I held firm. "If that's what you think, then we're done here. Enjoy, Darren." And I hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. The memory of unanswered calls, forgotten birthdays, and empty promises haunted me. I thought about the last dinner I had prepared for them, the wake of my late wife, and the cold absence of care that had been consistent for years. And I remembered the moment that finally made me stop swallowing everything silently. The following week, Lydia, my daughter, reached out. "Dad, Darren called me crying," she said. "He said you abandoned him." I explained everything calmly. The move without notice, the canceled medical plan, the years of neglect, the absence that had finally become unbearable. "Nobody missed me," I told her. "They missed what I could do for them, not me." Samuel Reed. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Dad, I didn't know. I thought doing was enough. I didn't realize you were the one providing the plan all these years." "I understand," I said, "but it's not about the surgery or the favors anymore. It's about respect, consideration. Being treated as a person, not a walking favor bank." She sighed. "I know, Dad, Darren was wrong." "Yes," I replied, "and if he needs help, he'll have to find a way." I found ways to handle my own life without anyone rescuing me. He can too. Weeks passed in silence. No calls, no texts, nothing. That's when the hardest truth settled in. The people I had loved and sacrificed for didn't miss me. They missed what I could provide. And that realization, painful as it was, felt strangely liberating. It was during this time that my neighbor of 20 years, Mr. Thomas Caldwell, came over. "Samuel, can I tell you something?" he asked, nervous. "Of course," I said. "Come in." He told me about Darren and his wife, Monica, whom he had seen arguing loudly at a cafe downtown. He lowered his voice, sharing words that cut through me. "They were mocking me, calling me stubborn, planning to ignore me until I realized I was wrong." I stayed silent. That day I realized something crucial. I needed to protect myself, legally and emotionally, before anyone else could attempt to manipulate or use me. The next day I called my longtime lawyer, Mr. Harrison Cole. He'd been helping me with small estate matters over the years, and I trusted him completely. "Samuel, good to hear from you," he said warmly over the phone. "What's going on?" I explained everything: the canceled health plan, the move without notice, Darren and Monica's behavior, and the things Mr. Caldwell had overheard. I could hear the seriousness in Harrison's voice. "Samuel," he said slowly, "this isn't just a family spat. From what you're describing, there's a clear pattern of entitlement and manipulation. If you want to protect yourself, we need to act now." I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief because I wasn't alone anymore, apprehension because I knew this meant confronting Darren in ways I'd never imagined. Harrison laid out a plan. First, we would draft a specific power of attorney, naming someone I trusted completely to make decisions if I became incapacitated. That was easy. Lydia would be perfect. Second, we would create a will with very clear instructions, making sure Darren couldn't take advantage of my assets. Third, we would formally declare before a notary public that I was in full possession of my mental faculties, in case anyone tried to question it in the future. I agreed to everything without hesitation. That afternoon, we went through the documents in detail. Harrison explained every clause, every potential loophole, and I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, I felt truly in control, but the real turning point came a week later. I was at the community garden when I ran into Mrs. Gloria Matthews, a retired schoolteacher and friend of my late wife. She greeted me warmly, her eyes twinkling with concern. "Samuel, I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "I saw Darren at the supermarket last week." I felt a pang of dread. "What happened?" "He was with Monica, arguing loudly. I went over to greet him, but he avoided me completely. And he was spreading stories about your memory, your ability to manage things. He wants people to think you're not capable of making your own decisions." I gritted my teeth. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "And he thinks he can manipulate the system this way?" I asked, trying to remain calm. Gloria shook her head. "That's why I came to you. You need to protect yourself, Samuel. He's creating a narrative to make others doubt you." I thanked her, my mind racing. I realized Darren had underestimated me. He hadn't accounted for the fact that I had already taken steps to protect myself, that I had witnesses, legal documents, and clear instructions in place. That evening, I sat on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. I remembered Harrison's words, "Actions have consequences, and Samuel, you're about to make sure that lesson is clear." From that moment on, I knew I wouldn't be a passive participant in my own life anymore. No more waiting. No more swallowing the hurt silently. It was time to reclaim my dignity, to set boundaries, and to ensure that my years ahead would be peaceful, respected, and free from manipulation. A few days after meeting with Harrison, I received a call from Lydia, my daughter, who had been keeping in touch despite everything. "Dad, I just got a text from Darren," she said, her voice tense. "He's upset. He's talking about the canceled health plan and says he wants to fix things." I took a deep breath. "Lydia, it's not about the health plan anymore. It's about respect. It's about him realizing that he can't treat me like a bank or a favor machine." "But Dad," she insisted, "he's upset. Maybe he'll calm down if you talk to him." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Lydia, if he wants to mend things, he needs to understand the consequences of his actions first. I won't be manipulated again." That week, I got a disturbing call from a bank. Darren had tried to take out a loan using my social security number as collateral. My heart sank and anger boiled inside me. He wasn't just upset, he was trying to take what wasn't his. I immediately called Harrison. "This is serious," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This is fraud. He's crossed the line from entitlement to criminal action." The next day, Harrison, Lydia, and I went to the bank together. We presented all the evidence, the canceled health plan, the forged documents, everything. The bank officials were shocked. "Mr. Samuel," one of them said, "you acted quickly. This could have caused massive issues." I felt a grim satisfaction. I had acted not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Harrison explained that we would file a criminal complaint for fraud and forgery. "Samuel, this is serious, but you have every right to protect yourself," he said. The day Darren was summoned to testify was tense. He avoided my gaze entirely, his confidence gone. When he realized the evidence was overwhelming, he started to cry, begging Lydia to speak to me, but Lydia was firm. "Dad gave everything, Darren, and this is too far." The judge didn't hold back, so the evidence is clear. Fraud and forgery are serious offenses, and you attempted both against your father. You are ordered to perform community service, pay a fine, and have no contact with him for 2 years. I left the courthouse exhausted, my body trembling from the mix of anger, relief, and vindication. Lydia hugged me tightly. "Dad, I'm so proud of you," she whispered. That night I sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Peace came not from revenge, but from reclaiming control. I realized something crucial. Love and family were not about entitlement. They were about respect, care, and genuine presence. After the courthouse ordeal, I knew I needed to reclaim my life completely. The big house had become a monument to past pain. Every corner held memories of family dinners that never were, birthdays forgotten, and holidays that ended in disappointment. I made a decision. It was time to downsize. With Lydia's help, we found a smaller, modern condo. 2 bedrooms, one for guests who truly wanted to be there, a balcony with a view of the park, and a sense of calm that the old house could never offer. The 24-hour concierge and community area promised safety and a chance to meet new people, something I hadn't done in years. Moving day was exhausting but liberating. Lydia and her husband, Mark, came from Raleigh to help. We loaded the truck, disassembled furniture, packed boxes. By evening, everything was in place. Sitting on the balcony with a cold drink, Lydia looked at me and said softly, "Dad, I'm proud of you. You took control." Her words warmed me in a way I hadn't felt in decades, not pity, not sympathy, but recognition. Recognition that I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. The next few weeks were a revelation. I started to meet my new neighbors, people with rich, interesting lives. Mr. Garrett, a retired airline pilot, always had a story that made me laugh. Mrs. Nola, a retired nurse, shared tips for staying healthy. Mr. Tony, who worked at a car plant in Tennessee, and I bonded over old memories of Delta's early days. These interactions were simple, light, and deeply fulfilling. I began to notice something else: peace. I no longer waited by the phone, hoping for a call that might never come. I no longer cooked elaborate meals, hoping someone would show up. My energy was my own, my time my own. Then came the visits from Lydia and her children. Real visits, not out of obligation, but from genuine desire. We baked cookies, watched movies, and talked about school, sports, and life. Their hugs were real, their laughter infectious. It reminded me that family wasn't about blood or entitlement. It was about who showed up, who cared, who was considerate. I also started reconnecting with my son Nathan, who had always been more observant and careful. He began visiting on long weekends. We went fishing at Lake Patterson, just like old times, and talked honestly about life, mistakes, regrets, and what it meant to protect yourself while still loving others. Financially, I was secure. The condo was affordable, my retirement steady, and investments provided comfort. I didn't need to sacrifice peace for security anymore, and yet there were moments I reflected on Darren. Seeing old photos of him as a child, smiling in my arms, I felt a pang of sadness. What might have been different? Could I have acted earlier? But I reminded myself, raising children comes without a manual. We do the best we can with what we have. Sometimes love isn't enough to fix everything. I realized something crucial. I forgave Darren, not to welcome him back into my life, but to release the burden from myself. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's reclaiming your life while learning from the past. That night I sat on the balcony, listening to the city lights twinkle below. Peace was no longer a distant dream. It was tangible, earned, and deeply satisfying. I had reclaimed control, my dignity, and the right to be treated with respect. Life in the new condo was calm, but tranquility has a way of inviting the unexpected. One afternoon I was watering the small balcony garden when the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Vance, Aliner's old colleague, smiling but with a hint of worry in her eyes. "Samuel," she said, "I heard something you need to know." "It's about Darren." My heart sank. Even though I had closed the door on him, I couldn't ignore the warning. Mrs. Vance explained that she had run into Darren at a local cafe. He was speaking loudly, trying to convince anyone who would listen that I was forgetful, mentally declining, and had mishandled finances. His words painted me as unstable, a setup, clearly aimed at questioning my decisions and possibly reversing the protections I had worked so hard to secure. I listened quietly, my blood boiling beneath the calm exterior. That was it, the last straw. No one would manipulate me or attack my reputation without consequence. Mrs. Vance stayed a while, giving me more details and offering support. Her loyalty reminded me that family isn't always about blood, it's about who shows up when it matters. The very next day, I called Harrison. "We need to act," I said. I explained everything Mrs. Vance had told me, adding every detail I remembered about Darren's previous actions. The forged power of attorney, the attempted loan in my name, and the defamation spreading through the town. Henry nodded solemnly. "Samuel," he said, "this is a textbook case of fraud and defamation. You have the documents, witnesses, and proof. We can protect your assets and your reputation. Darren will learn that actions have consequences." We drafted a plan. First, a criminal complaint for fraud and forgery. Second, documentation to refute any claims of mental incapacity, backed by the notary declaration I had registered. Third, a warning through legal channels to prevent further unauthorized attempts at financial manipulation. While this was happening, I received a call from Lydia. She had spoken to Nathan and my grandchildren. "Dad," she said, "they want to be here for you, not for obligations. They understand what's real." Her words reinforced that my life was shifting toward genuine relationships built on respect, not exploitation. 2 weeks later, the police contacted me. The fraud complaint was official. Darren had tried to manipulate banks, forge documents, and challenge my authority, but with attorney Henry and solid evidence, nothing could touch me. I felt a strange combination of satisfaction and calm, the kind that comes from knowing you've prepared thoroughly, that you've taken control, and that justice is now on your side. The day Darren was summoned to court was tense. He avoided my eyes, thin and disheveled, clearly worn by stress. I sat silently, observing, letting the weight of the past months settle. When the judge reviewed the evidence, fraudulent documents, witness testimonies, and proof of prior defamation, the ruling was decisive. Darren faced community service, fines, and a 2-year restriction from contacting me or my assets. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt relief unlike anything I had imagined. This wasn't revenge, it was protection. I had defended myself and my dignity. Lydia hugged me, Nathan called to check in, and for the first time in decades, I felt truly secure. That evening, I sat in the balcony chair, sipping tea, watching the city lights glow. I realized the hardest part wasn't standing up to Darren. The hardest part had been understanding that some people only want what you provide, not who you are. Recognizing that truth freed me, and with that freedom came clarity. Family, respect, and love are not obligations, they are choices. Those who choose to be part of your life deserve to be there. Those who take without giving, who manipulate and disrespect, do not. For the first time in years, Samuel's life felt entirely his own. I had walls of protection around me, friendships that mattered, and a small circle of family who genuinely cared. The lesson was clear. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival, respect, and love for oneself. The weeks after the court ruling were strangely serene. It was as if a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. I spent mornings tending the balcony garden, afternoons reading in the sun, and evenings simply listening to the hum of the city below. Life had slowed, and in that calm, I discovered things I'd forgotten I loved. One Saturday, Lydia called and said she was bringing the kids over. My grandchildren, tiny, curious, and full of energy, burst through the door, laughing and shouting like the halls of my old house had once echoed. They weren't here because they had to be, or because they wanted something. They were here because they wanted me. That simple truth filled my chest with warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed. We baked cookies, their small hands smearing flour across the counters. They told stories from school, made me taste test each cookie, and insisted on showing me their drawings. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in the role of grandfather, not as a provider, but as someone genuinely loved and wanted. Lydia watched us quietly, sipping her tea. "Dad," she said, this is how it should have always been." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I realized she was right. It hadn't been about gifts, favors, or financial help. It had been about presence, care, and respect. Jerome also started visiting more frequently. He and I would take long walks in the park, talk about life, regret, and the choices we make. He had been through his own struggles with Darren's manipulation, but seeing me stand firm inspired him. We weren't just father and son anymore. We were a team, a support system, a family built on understanding and respect. One afternoon, I ran into Mr. Mario Holloway in the lobby. He clapped me on the shoulder, a knowing smile on his face. "Samuel, you've done what a lot of men never do. You protected yourself, and you still opened your heart to the people who matter." I smiled, feeling the full weight of that truth. My life wasn't perfect. I had scars from the past, disappointments, and wounds that might never fully heal. But I also had clarity, freedom, and relationships that were real. That realization was more powerful than any revenge, any legal victory, any material possession. Evenings became my favorite time. I'd sit with a cup of tea on the balcony, watch the sunset, and think about everything I had survived. The betrayal, the neglect, the manipulation, they were all chapters in a story I had now rewritten. And in rewriting it, I had taken back my dignity, my peace, and my life. Sometimes, late at night, I'd reflect on Darren. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt something sharper, acceptance. I understood that some people can never give the love or respect you deserve, no matter what you do. Accepting that truth had been painful, but it was also liberating. Samuel's world had transformed. The condo, small and bright, was no longer a place of solitude, but a sanctuary. The friendships I'd cultivated in the building, Mr. Gerald, Mrs. Noosa, and Mr. Tony, brought laughter and companionship. Lydia's visits brought joy and continuity, and Jerome's presence brought reassurance and mutual respect. For the first time in decades, I realized I didn't need anyone to validate my existence. I had survived neglect, betrayal, and manipulation. I had learned to stand firm, protect my legacy, and choose who I allowed into my life. And in that, I had discovered something far more valuable than money, health plans, or favors. I had discovered freedom, and as I looked out over the city that night, I promised myself this: I would never let anyone, not even my own children, take that freedom from me again. My peace, my dignity, and my heart were mine to protect. The months after the hearing brought a quiet I hadn't felt in years. I stopped waiting for calls that never came, stopped preparing meals that went uneaten, stopped hoping for gestures that were never meant for me. It wasn't loneliness anymore, it was freedom. I sold the big house, the one full of memories and unmet expectations. Lydia helped me move into a smaller, brighter condo with a balcony overlooking the park. Fewer rooms to clean, fewer reminders of neglect, more peace in my days. Jerome started visiting regularly too. We fished at the lake, talked about life, regrets, and choices. It was simple, it was calm, and it was real. Lydia and her children came often, and the bond we formed was genuine. They hugged me, included me in their lives, and called me Grandpa with love, not obligation. I realized that family isn't about blood, it's about presence, care, and respect. Darren and Monica, they vanished from my life. Their chaos and selfishness no longer affected me. I had reclaimed my peace, and that was enough. Looking back, I don't feel anger or regret. I feel a quiet pride in the choices I made, in protecting myself, in setting boundaries, and in demanding respect. Forgiving Darren didn't mean reopening doors. It meant freeing myself from carrying resentment. I learned that love isn't unconditional if it erodes your dignity. Respect is a two-way street. Family is who's truly there for you. If you enjoyed this story, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel. 2 more of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen now. Go ahead and choose one, you won't want to miss them.